Well, good morning. It appears we have a quorum, so let's call the meeting to order. You have before you and have been furnished copies in advance of the minutes of the June 26th Advisory Board meeting. Let me say, to begin with, thank you to Susan for filling in for me. There's been a consensus that things went more smoothly with you in charge. But anyway, thanks so much, Susan, for filling in for me. Brenda and I were on a 55th wedding anniversary cruise.
Hooray! How wonderful.
The good news of which was we're back home. And I might add, still married.
Going to make it to 56.
Well, you've had copies of the minutes of the prior meeting. Are there additions or corrections? Been moved that we approve the minutes. Is there a second? Second. Been moved and seconded that we approve the minutes. Further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The minutes are approved. You also have in your packet the MAPS 3 revenue and expenditure report and the budget and obligations report. David's going to talk to us about that. David?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You have in your packet, as Mr. McDaniel said, revenue and expenditure report for the period ending May 31st, 2014. On the revenue side for the month, there's $9,234,405. For the fiscal year, there's $98,877,711 for total program revenue of $407,762,782. On the expenditure side, you can see that for the month, there's $1,723,335. For the fiscal year, $27,797,419. And for total expenditures, $57,700,279. The bulk of the expenditures this month for Fairgrounds has been A&E fees, and also we did the deposit for the 1% for art. So that has come out of the account.
Yay, thank you, David.
That's also included in the river and in the trails. So if there's any other questions on that, I can answer it. And also, we have the MAPS 3 budget and obligations report as has been requested, and you can see that the line items for the budgets and how much is obligated in the remaining budgets for each of those projects. So I'd be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Michael, always like to start with you.
I like the format, and I think there's a lot more information than we had in the past, and appreciate that. I don't have any other comments or thoughts.
Anyone else? I want to point out one thing that I always try to remind myself, and they've done a really nice job of explaining it. If you'll notice the two footnotes, 1 and 2, in the first two columns, the month and fiscal year, the target is revised annually. And the target on the total is a different target. It's what we had originally in the $777 million. So when you see some minus numbers in percentage-wise, really the main thing to look at is the percentage in the target for the overall project, because we're still, the revenue is coming in at a higher rate than was projected in the original budget. Even though from time to time, as it's redone annually, it may be a negative number.
So that was actually my question, and I just did want to make sure. So for the fiscal year, where we show $97,358,000 and it's 1.2 under, that's under a revised target based on how tax collections have been coming in.
That's right.
Not what we projected.
Right. That's
exactly.
Current year budget, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're 5.6% above the original target that we set in December of 2009.
That's correct.
Exactly.
That's awesome.
Meg, everybody is very anxious to hear what you're saying, and your mic wasn't on, so you need to turn that on when you talk.
Now my mic is on. And I was just trying to confirm those numbers, so thank you.
Other questions? Then shall we move to receive the report?
Move the report.
Is there a second? Moved and second that we receive and approve the reports that have been provided under item 3. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The report is received and approved. David, item 4.
Item 4 is recommend resolution approving trail alignment study report for the MAPS 3 Trail Improvements Phase 2 I-44 West Trail Project M3-T002. I think Ms. Hooper would like to address this.
Susan?
I am sorry we didn't have a quorum yesterday, and we're excited about this trail, but at this time, we'd like to strike this.
I would second that motion.
Been moved and seconded that we strike this item from the agenda, and could we anticipate we would see it next month?
Yes, sir.
All right. Further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The item is stricken. All right. That brings us to item number 5.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Item 5 is recommend resolution renewing the engineering consulting services contract with Jacobs Engineering Group Incorporated for the MAPS 3 Transit Modern Streetcar for an additional one-year term from July 1st, 2014 to June 30th, 2015, retroactive to July 1st, 2014, project M3-S003. This is the ongoing contract that we have with Jacobs to do the streetcar design and the things that they're doing now, the conceptual design, the car RFP that you're going to see in a minute. It is renewable every year, so we just need to renew that contract.
Second.
David, could you clarify how much you're asking us to approve on this?
There is no increase on money. It is just a renewal of the contract as it currently exists.
Is there
Another
further,
year's worth of services, so it will be more money, or?
No, there's already an amount of money in the contract, and we do it by work order.
Okay.
So we just need to renew it for an additional year.
Thank you.
further discussion? Bob?
Mr. Chairman, I just noted both in the cover memo and in the resolution itself, there's a reference to an August date.
I'm sorry, I failed to mention that. You've been given a revised memo with your packet here. There was a paragraph that was on there that was meant for the council memo that would indicate that it was approved today for the council, and it was put on this memo. So the revised memo that you have in front of you is the memo that we should approve.
Okay, and the resolution then would also be,
It didn't affect the resolution. It was just information in the background on the memo.
because the last line of the resolution is recommended by the advisory board this 24th day of August.
There's two mistakes on there. It should have said July, and it shouldn't have been on there for today's memo. That was meant for the council memo, and it was just a stenographer's error.
Okay. Right.
Right.
Okay.
Let's pick another example. All right. We have before us the resolution and the amendment which corrects the typographical errors in the resolution, and it is that we'll be voting on as corrected. Is that the understanding of those that made the motion and second?
Yes.
All right, so it is the resolution as corrected. Is there further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The resolution as corrected is adopted. David?
Item 6 is recommend draft request for proposals for MAPS 3 modern streetcar vehicles, project M3-S005. You notice that it says draft, and that's because there are some technical things that still need to be resolved, and some of those came to light yesterday in the subcommittee meeting. But as far as the general content of the technical part of the RFP, that will not change. One thing that came up yesterday is there's some language that's formatted in one section that needs to be put in another section. So it is just typographical kind of things and formatting issues, and would be glad to go into that in depth if you wish. But what we have as far as the RFP today is we have Rob Edgecombe here today from Jacobs Engineering to give you a presentation on the RFP in completion, in total. That's it.
All right.
So we'd like to invite him up to the podium.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. For those of you who haven't met before, I'm Rob Edgecombe from Jacobs Engineering, and just want to give you a run through this morning of the scope of the request for proposals that we've put together and that we presented to the subcommittee yesterday afternoon. It's a couple of areas I want to focus on. One is some of the specifics about the vehicle that we're including in the RFP, and then there's how the RFP has been structured and what we're aiming to get from the bidders and why we've structured it the way we have. So if anyone has any questions as I go through, then please feel free to jump up as we go. So just to talk about the vehicle itself, first of all, we have got a modern streetcar design here. We're not looking at a retro streetcar. This is a modern looking vehicle, and we're looking for a combination of wired and wireless operation. So it will operate from an overhead contact system, wires over the top, but it has wireless capability either through batteries or through supercapacitors. The reason for the wireless capability is so that the vehicle can get underneath the bridges where we do not have the clearance to put overhead wires in. But we are going to also have far greater capability, we hope, from the wireless system so that we can get greater range than just underneath the bridges. I'll talk a little bit more in a moment about how we're looking to assess the bidders on that. So, we will charge the wireless capability while the vehicle is on the wire. So the vehicle will effectively be continuously charging while it's running on the wire, and then will operate wirelessly when it has to go through the sections where we cannot have wire installed. We have options for different vehicle dimensions, and I'll actually come back to the vehicle dimensions a little bit more at the end, but there is a preference for having a wider vehicle. The width of the vehicle is particularly important when we're looking at the infrastructure design. The clearances through the streets, and also where we will put the platforms for the vehicles when, so that they can actually have a close match between the side of the vehicle and the platform, so that disability access can be achieved without any need for any additional bridging. The goals for the RFP itself, what we're really keen to do here is to make sure we get as competitive a process as possible. We want to get as many people bidding on these vehicles as we can. That will give us a better pressure on pricing from the vendors. So we're trying to get a specification that is as open as possible to people who have already got vehicles that they've designed and built in the past, so that we can take advantage of what they've already done and try and minimize the development costs. We have a number of sort of competing technical goals with the project, and what we've tried to do is come up with the compromise that gets the best value out of all of those elements. We're trying to minimize development costs, keep the vehicles under budget, make sure we can deliver them in a schedule that meets the needs of the project, and make sure that we have minimized technical risk so that we don't put any additional pressure on the schedule. Obviously, we've mentioned the off-wire capability. We've, in the RFP, we asked people to explain how they would perform against a minimum off-wire performance to get through the clearances that we already know are a problem, but then we've asked them to give us how far the vehicle can actually perform off-wire. Making sure that we get that response from them in a way that allows us to have an apples and apples comparison between bidders is really important. Otherwise, we end up with people giving us all sorts of different scenarios and we can't compare them. So what we've tried to do is structure the RFP in a way so that they can give us a straightforward performance evaluation of their vehicle, and then we can understand who has got the greatest off-wire capability, which we can then use in the future to understand how that might benefit the system as a whole. Fairness and competitiveness is key in the way we've structured the RFP. We've done a lot of things in how we put this together to make sure that we avoid situations where people might be able to protest. So we've got a process for how we will evaluate the proposals. We've identified what the scoring criteria are in there and how we've weighted those. And so we will then follow that process, and that way we're aiming to minimize the potential for anyone to protest, because obviously schedule is really critical to the program at the moment, and anyone who comes up with a protest is going to cause a schedule delay. So we're trying to make sure that we never get into that situation. The other thing that we need to understand is the infrastructure impacts of the vehicle selection. So we've made sure that in the way we've structured it, we understand what the configuration of the vehicle is, and that then feeds back into the infrastructure design work that the team will be doing, either from the placement of the tracks, placement of the platforms, or the power consumption requirements. So we're trying to make sure we understand up front what the needs of the vehicle are, so that we can allow the engineering of the infrastructure to go ahead in a timely manner. So what are the key requirements we expect of the bidders? First of all, we have quite a detailed technical specification that we've put together on the vehicles, so they have to comply with that technical specification. We've tried to keep that quite open in the way that we've structured the technical specification. There are some key things that are obviously important to us from a performance point of view, but we're trying to write it in a way that doesn't push us into a design that is not necessary for our system, so that we can get as many people to bid as possible. People have different sizing of their vehicles. We don't want to exclude people for no good reason. And that way we can try and keep this as open and competitive as we can, but they've got to comply with the basic requirements. Obviously, achieving the service that we want to deliver, that's a key requirement out of this. And then the other thing is we're trying to understand what technical risk is and what are proprietary technologies in the vehicle. Long-term sustainability of the fleet in service is a big deal. The cost of operation and support of the fleet is considerably more than the cost of buying the vehicles in the first place. So making sure that we're not hamstrung by proprietary issues or obsolescence issues. This is a technology that's evolving very quickly at the moment. Streetcars are having a bit of a renaissance in the US at the moment, and the development of off-wire technology is progressing quite rapidly. So we want to make sure that in whatever solution we go with, we haven't painted ourselves into a corner. We have something that has long-term sustainability, and we can get best value out of what the industry has to offer. Just a couple of quick points on the vehicles themselves. Obviously I've mentioned quite a bit about off-wire. It's a very important part of what we've put in the RFP, so the capability is front and center in the requirements. It's a modern vehicle, as I mentioned, so none of the vintage type of vehicles that you might see in some cities. And so it's now, we have level boarding for full compliance with ADA requirements. So we will be fully compliant with the vehicle. We have a range of lengths and widths that we've included in the RFP. As I said, this is designed to avoid excluding people as much as possible, to make sure we get as many people bidding as we can on this and therefore get a competitive process. The biggest driver on there is the one at the bottom. Maybe I should put that to the top because it's so important. Height is a big deal on this vehicle, making sure that we can get through the critical clearances that we have on the system. So that's a very important point for us in the evaluation of the vehicles. So how does this happen next? I have here a list of the stepping stones that we'll have to go through from basically where we are now until the point where we award a contract. As you can see, there are multiple steps. So in the I won't read these out one for one. You can read as well as I can. But just to highlight the important elements in it, the RFP process has multiple steps in there. So we get the RFP out when it's finally approved for issue. We will require the bidders to come to a pre-proposal meeting. So if they don't show up at that pre-proposal meeting, they won't be allowed to bid. They will then be able to review the RFP, go through a series of questions, and they'll be able to submit questions to us through the normal City BidSync process, which we will use for this, but they can identify issues, either clarifications, or if they see something which could potentially exclude them from bidding, and they can ask whether we can change that. We will look at that. If it is not going to then preclude other people from bidding, and in fact helps our process, then we may well accept that. If it's not something that we're willing to compromise on, then we won't change it.
Is that pre-proposal meeting in Oklahoma City?
Yes.
So people will be here and be able to walk the route and
Yeah, absolutely.
do all that sort of thing? Okay.
Yeah. And so then we will have a process where we will issue any addenda to the RFP. The bidders will all get that, and then they will submit their proposals. We have scope to have interviews with them. That isn't just a question of them showing up and giving us a beautiful dog and pony show about how wonderful they are. If we see that there's a need to evaluate them, either their capabilities or maybe the facilities, then we may take the opportunity to do that as part of the evaluation, because a lot of people will tell you wonderful things they can do, but often if you go and see what they're actually doing for real right now, you get a better feel for their ability to deliver. The risk of the bidders being able to deliver is something we take very seriously on this RFP. Complying with the schedule, as was discussed at some length yesterday in the subcommittee meeting, is a critical issue on delivering this program. And there are plenty of car builders in the past who have been less than successful in coming in on time. So we recognize that's really important, and we want to make sure that as part of the evaluation that gets the attention that it needs. We will then go through the recommendation process when we've gone through the evaluation with the team, and the steps for approval. Obviously, you're probably more familiar with those than I am, so I won't be trying to teach you anything there. And then hopefully we'll get, when that's approved, we'll go through the process of negotiating with the details of the contract with the vendors and getting the permission to award the contract, and then finally the notice to award. And then we'll be off to the races and getting the vehicle designed and developed. So those are the multiple steps that are upcoming. Obviously, the first step is to get the RFP out.
Realizing that some of these meetings and so forth are out of your control, I noticed there are no dates here. Could you give us an estimate of your time estimate of how long this takes?
We think that there's probably the reason we don't have dates in there at the moment is because it depends on when the RFP gets issued, so everything cascades out of that.
But just a general sense of the timing.
Yeah, I mean, the RFP phase will probably be something of the order of 3 months itself to give them the opportunity to review the specs, put the questions in, if we make amendments, and then for them to prepare their proposals. So we think it'll be something of that order. The evaluation will probably be a month or so on top of that. I'm giving you an estimate here, but it should be of that order. Then the authorization process, you're probably better able to answer that than I am. So, you know, we'll be looking to get the vehicle award, I guess, by probably end of the year, beginning of New Year at the latest, David, would you say? I'm stepping onto schedule issues here, which I'm probably not the best person to answer. So if I'm out of line here, then David will, I'm sure, tell me. But that's the sort of order of magnitude that I think we'll be looking at. There were a couple of mentions about amendments that are out there, and just to highlight, apart from the formatting on the legal points that are being reordered, the technical changes that we're talking about are quite minimal issues, and they're related to what radios the city is already operating, just to make sure we're interoperable. So we're not changing the scope of what's involved, we're just making sure the definition is clear so that the bidders understand exactly what it is that they're being required to do. So that they can't come back with a change order and ask for more money. So it's just making sure we've finalised those details with the interoperability with the bus system. So those are the technical changes that we're working on right now.
Rob, I believe that the subcommittee also asked to go from 4 base cars to 5.
Absolutely, yes. We discussed the number of vehicles in the RFP is something that was quite a lengthy discussion, and the reason is that we wanted to make sure that we had sufficient budget to buy the minimum number in the firm order. If we had put, say, 6 cars in as a base and options on top of that, and we only had a budget to buy 5 at the price that came in, we would invalidate the RFP and we'd have to start again. So we wanted to make sure that we didn't get ourselves in a situation like that. This was discussed with the subcommittee yesterday, and so now we're going to have 5 as the base car, and then we'll have options for additional vehicles on top of that. The discussion was a little bit about the pricing, how having more vehicles obviously is hopefully going to get a more competitive price out of people. But the upside that we have in the way we're doing it is that the options should be significantly cheaper than the base vehicles, because all of the non-recurring costs for the project has to be picked up in the base order. So the option vehicles would then be cheaper. And that will be part of the evaluation of the proposals, is not just the base price but the option pricing as well.
What is the approximate number of suppliers, and are any in Oklahoma?
I don't believe there are any in Oklahoma. This is a worldwide industry. There are domestic U.S. suppliers, but quite a few of them are in other countries as well. There are probably about a dozen companies out there that could conceivably bid on this. How many will actually bid for us, we don't know. We're trying to structure this in a way that gets as many of them as possible to take interest. They're small orders, streetcar orders. If you build light rail vehicles, you tend to buy larger fleets, but streetcars are, by their nature, a smaller fleet. So it can be quite a competitive environment because people need to get more orders in order to be sustainable. So we're optimistic that we'll get quite a few of them in there. Several of them are domestic U.S. producers, but several of them are overseas producers as well.
And we received 12 letters of interest, I think, in our process earlier this year. And so we feel comfortable that we haven't excluded any appreciable number of manufacturers with this specificity.
Perhaps you could speak a little bit to the Buy America.
Yeah, absolutely.
Rating of that.
We have Buy America included in the RFP from the point of view of understanding what the performance of the bidders would be against Buy America. Because this isn't a federally funded program, they don't have to comply. But we want to understand what their capabilities are for domestic production and what the systems are that are produced domestically. In the subcommittee discussion, there was a lot of talk about this because of the long-term sustainability and support of the equipment. So the ability to source parts domestically versus having to get things from overseas. So we're not requiring Buy America in there, but it is part of our evaluation process to see how much Buy America compliance there is in the proposal that they're making to us.
And that would be important going forward if we were to be successful in gaining federal funds for an expansion of the system, we would be required.
Absolutely. And so if federal funding for future stages of the program is involved, then Buy America requirements would become mandatory. But what we're doing now does not preclude us from doing that in the future. Any additional vehicles would have to comply with those requirements. And it wouldn't, the ones that we would buy through this program would not be handicapped by that. So what we're trying to do is understand what the future options are, but at the moment we're keeping our options open.
Ask a question.
Absolutely.
On the River Committee, we have like our goal for the water park is Charlotte. What is your dream place of a wonderfully running streetcar system in the United States and Europe? What are you looking as the pinnacle of?
Well, if you ask anyone who's built their system, they'll tell you it's wonderful. So I don't want to sort of look like I'm being too much of a favorite. I mean, the poster child for streetcar development in the US has been Portland. Portland has redeveloped a lot of its downtown area as a result of not purely because of the streetcar, but the streetcar has been an integral part of the redevelopment of that city. A lot of programs are actually just coming into fruition right now. So, one is opening this weekend, I think, in Tucson. But Portland is well established. Seattle has also done very well with their streetcar system development. So if you wanted to look at good examples, those are ones that I would point you to straight away to see what they have done for the overall plan of regeneration of parts of the city that previously were not doing very well and are now doing a lot better.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to add something that not only is this a Jacobs engineering product, but it's gone many weeks of review with various departments within the city, and not only the MAPS department and ADG, but also our procurement division and our municipal counselor's office. So there's been a lot of people working on this project.
Rob, can you say real quick what your grading, how the grading criteria looks like, or just tell us about what that looks like? Yeah, we've got a series of evaluation criteria for the overall proposals, and we have weightings between them. I foolishly have left them in my bag behind me, but so technical specification and compliance is a big part of that. Schedule is a big part of that. Things like previous experience that the bidders with other projects that they've done for other people. We evaluate that. Buy America is part of that evaluation as well. And price, obviously, is part of that evaluation. Just to sort of talk about how we built up that evaluation, it's usually quite a strong source of debate as we go through this, because if everyone has something that they think is vitally important and they would like that to be rated very highly, and if everything is weighted as highly as everyone wanted to, we'd have 1,000% on the evaluation. So you have to make a judgment call about the split. So hit the big one first, price. At the moment, we have 35% of the evaluation is against price. Sometimes that causes people to raise their eyebrows because they think it's not enough. But if you want to have schedule compliance and technical compliance and all those things to have sufficient impact to make a judgment about whether a bidder is a competent bidder for you, you have to split out those elements as well and give them significant weighting. So price is 35, technical I think is about, now I'm going to wish that I brought that with me, but I think it's about 30%. Schedule is I think about 15%. Past experience, oh, you're a gentleman. Okay, well, you're not a gentleman. I know that.
So performance and operational requirements is 30%. Program management, their ability to deliver and manage programs of this type, how they're structuring their engineering and their project teams, that's 10%. Schedule is 15%, and obviously that's a really big deal on this project. Then pricing 35, and we also have references in there from previous customers. We're expecting them to give us a list of who they've worked with, and we'll talk to those people, get some feedback on whether these were people we want to work with or not. So, we're not just relying on the bidders to tell us how wonderful they are. We're intending to do some due diligence of our own to make sure that we understand that. Now, within these criteria, there is more detail. So it's not just a question of 30% or nothing. We have a series of items that we're building up at the moment about how each of these is scored, so that 30% for technical performance and operational requirements will have a series of individual elements beneath it that we will then use to evaluate the proposals when they come in, so that we have a rigorous process that we'll be working with, and the people that will be doing the evaluation will be well briefed on how to do that evaluation when the time comes.
I certainly understand the requirement for wireless underneath bridges and overpasses, but what's behind some of this? It says here consideration for given for wireless capability. Is the objective to try to make this whole route as wireless as possible, or what's behind some of the consideration for that issue?
We've had a very long series of discussions about the technologies that are out there for wired versus wireless operation, and we understand that there are competing pressures about what people want the system to look like and what they want it to perform like. We looked at some of the alternative technologies for off-wire operation, and in the end, the compromise that we came to in trying to make sure that we could meet schedule and budget was to go with a relatively conventional charging system, i.e. the overhead power supply, but to make use of onboard storage on the vehicles. Now, onboard storage of energy is something that is developing at a very rapid pace right now. So if you look at if I say batteries, I'm also including supercapacitors in that, so forgive me if I sometimes supercapacitors. Both technologies are available in the market at the moment, but the capacity of these storage systems is going up and up and up. I mean, it's the same thing as if you look at electric cars. Before they used to go 30 miles, now 200 miles, something like that. So this is something that's advancing very rapidly, and even in the timescales of the project we're looking at, we're going to see technology taking steps forward. So we think that we're going to get more and more off-wire potential out of the vehicle just as a result of technological evolution. But we wanted to make sure that we didn't make ourselves a development program. So if we had unlimited budget and schedule, then we might be able to do something that would be very, very advanced. But we would be taking a lot of risk in doing that, and that's not, I think, at the heart of what we're trying to do to deliver a product to the people in the timescales that they're expecting it. So what we've done here is we've tried to make that compromise. We'll get off-wire capability. We have a minimum requirement. We're pretty certain that we'll get quite a lot more than that minimum just by where the state of the art is right now. For example, the Seattle streetcar order required 2 miles off-wire. So, and we're going to be probably a step ahead of that just as a result of the natural progression of things. So we've tried to go with a minimum risk approach to the vehicle, make use of what the market has already been able to clearly demonstrate they can deliver, get the benefits off-wire where we can, understand how that impacts on the rest of the system other than just the underpasses and the bridges, and that will be part of the ongoing process to see what we can make use of that for the future. But we're trying to minimize risk, cost, and schedule impact.
So is it fair to say that if the technology was there, that, or pretty fair to assume it perhaps, that we would have a totally wireless system?
Totally wireless is...
if the technology was credible and reliable.
Well, that's a big if.
Yeah.
If we could go to that, then at some point it might be it will be achievable in the future. Whether I think that that's something where we want to be at the moment, from the point of view of actually delivering the program, I think that would be a goal that would not be a wise one to chase.
And I might jump in on that too, Rob, if you don't mind. So there are wireless technologies that exist. I don't believe there's a 100% wireless system operating in the U.S. Mark? Okay. Ann Lee?
Well, there's something with Disneyland
Okay, sure. So, but they also are proprietary technologies where you have to bid out the infrastructure, rails, and the car at the same time, which is not legal in Oklahoma. So we have that brick wall that we've tried to push through over the last year, but we're unsuccessful. But at the same time, we're not terribly concerned about that loss because we also don't want to be a guinea pig and do something that nobody's done yet. I like the approach that we have because it's kind of a hedged approach where we will have some wireless component, and as batteries get better and as we decommission and replace older batteries, we can replace them with improved batteries and then maybe take down another catenary pole and extend to another mile of wireless. So it's kind of like phasing in a better technology as it becomes available. Instead of just all or nothing and kind of dictating our future now, we're able to take what works now, but then also embrace what we know will be available as the time comes.
Absolutely, and I'd just add something onto that, the method we're using here limits our exposure to proprietary technologies. If you get to sort of more interesting charging systems that use embedded technologies in the infrastructure, you've basically committed yourself to one-person system. Now, there's obviously a pricing issue there in the future about the fact that if you're stuck with one person that they've got you as a captive market, well, that you may be able to deal with that. The other issue is obsolescence, because this technology is evolving so fast. You really don't know in 4 or 5 years' time whether that will even be the thing they want to do anymore. So whereas the way we're going with using the combination of onboard storage and the existing overhead gives us a far more resilient solution for long-term obsolescence issues.
Early on in your presentation, you highlighted the width was a primary concern, and you said you would come back to that.
Yeah, the width of the vehicles is, there's a discussion about it obviously factors into the infrastructure. So how much clearance you need to get the vehicles through the streets, where you need to build the platforms, because the infrastructure build-out is a critical path item on the project. So making sure that we've identified the width of the vehicle in a timely manner is something that we've got to do to make sure the infrastructure guys can build their system in a timely way. The other issue is the preference for width. There is a preference for people to have a wider vehicle, but we haven't excluded other vehicle types because we didn't want to narrow the competition field too soon. So we have got a range of widths in there so people can bid alternative sizes of vehicle, but we will give a preference to the wider vehicles as we get them. But this way we have a more competitive and open environment. The difference in the widths, just from what it actually means from a vehicle point of view is, and we're not talking about a huge variation in width. We're talking about 8 inches difference between the widest and the narrowest, roughly. And but what that does mean is you might have a 2x2 seating in the widest vehicles, you'll have a 2x1 seating in the narrowest vehicles. What you will have in the narrower ones is greater standing capacity because you'll have more available floor space. So you actually end up with a vehicle with quite a similar capacity. The length of the vehicle obviously is also a factor in that. So if you have, and we have varying lengths, so if you have a slightly longer vehicle, you actually make some of that capacity back up again. So it's really a question of what the needs of the system are, making sure you can fit through the infrastructure, and whatever other long-term plans there may be for the system. But we have to pick something at some point in order to make sure the infrastructure guys can do their design work.
Okay. Given the size and nature of this project, what is the potential number of subcontractors that may be a part of this project, and are they identified during the selection process?
On the vehicle side, there will be a vast number of subcontractors. Vehicle designers are more of an integrator. Some of them do some of their own technology as well, but a lot of it is subcontracted. So, for example, traction motors, battery technology, they'll often build their own body shell, but the seats will come from someone else. The interior trim panels, windows, all of the control electronics, the pantograph on the top, the truck may be theirs, but the wheels may be someone else's. So it's a huge number of subcontractors that are involved in a project of this scale. And we will see the critical vendors as part of the RFP. We won't see down to the detail level, but when it comes to things like traction equipment, we'll understand whether they're providing their own or whether they're buying in. There are only a couple of manufacturers of this type of equipment worldwide, so a lot of people will be buying similar equipment from vendors. But we'll see the critical ones, but we won't see sort of the tier 2 and tier 3 type of suppliers.
And I'm sorry, just with regard to the cars again, we've got some flexibility in width and we've got flexibility in length. We have a max height.
Yes.
Is that height unusual, or, should it fit within a range of standard cars?
We think the standard cars should fit within it. It's quite tight, but we think it shouldn't require anything particularly unusual.
Great, thank you.
Other questions?
What is the budget for the procurement of the streetcars?
I am not the person to ask that question.
What was the question?
What is the budget for the procurement of streetcars?
I can't remember off the top of my head. Mike, do you remember? I might ask Mike Mize to come up and help me out on this.
I'm going to ask a numbers question.
The construction and procurement of cars and rails and track and all the infrastructure is $92 million. And it may be divided, it's going to depend on who the car manufacturer is, what the budget is. We've left the actual budget for the cars open. We're working with the total $92 million construction and procurement budget, and we're going to work within that. That's why this project is phased the way it is, so that we can get a cost on the number of vehicles, design the system, bid the track and the infrastructure, and know when we've done that exactly how much of that $92 million we have left, or whether it's been exceeded as part of phase 1. So
we don't have a target for the car, so that means the length of the track or the length of the system may be affected by the cost of the car.
It could be. We're hopeful that it won't be, but and frankly, with the kind of technology that's been proposed,
but we've designed or proposed, I guess, a certain route, and we have a cost estimate on that. So what does that leave us for procurement, I guess? We're kind of back into it, or?
Yeah, we may have to back into it, and that's really the goal here, is to make sure that we don't exceed budget.
You also mentioned, I think, that some of the suppliers have a history of not being able to deliver on time or not meeting the schedule. So do we build into the contract penalties or something on that to try to ensure that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, go with liquidated damages for delivery. It's certainly something you want into a contractual mechanism, but as I've said to many vendors in the past, I don't want you to give me all of these wonderful things as what you're going to do when it's going to go wrong. I want to make sure the project goes right in the first place. So, the selection process is very focused on making sure you pick somebody who is not a risk item in that. There are vendors out there that we know have a poor track record, and they will be evaluated accordingly as part of their response. We'll look at their track record and what they've done, because we know that how critical this is. But yeah, you'll have contractual mechanisms in there to penalise them for poor performance. And the same thing for warranty issues when the vehicles are in service as well. There are performance mechanisms once the vehicles have been delivered as well.
Other questions? Well, before you leave the podium, I want to ask Nathaniel and Zane if they have any comments for us to consider from the subcommittee. And if you would remain at the podium, they may need your help. So go ahead.
Well, I think some of the same questions here we asked yesterday. Actually, Councilwoman Sire asked about the vehicles, roughly how much they cost. That's kind of where you're getting at too. A number of anywhere between $3 and $5 million per vehicle. Now, it's not budgeted or anything like he just said, but it's just good to know kind of in your head what the magnitude is and what the range is too. So technology can really affect that. Other than that, we did spend a lot of time talking about the width, because do we need to decide that now to be able to accommodate these future, extensions? The regional transit dialogue, approved last week, extending this kind of capability as far as 63rd and through Capitol Hill. And so we were struggling with, do we need to decide that now? Are we condemning ourselves or setting ourselves up for success either way if we decide that? And we concluded that no, we'll keep it open as far as the width, and we'll see what comes back. And that will actually help inform that iterative decision as far as planning ahead and planning for the system as is. Other than that, really, these questions, we feel like we're balancing the schedule with considerations for risk, both technology and performance, and with the budget. So a lot of those questions revolved around scheduling and number of vehicles and like I said, width. But after that was said and done, and with that amendment to the 5-vehicle minimum, we approved for recommendation unanimously, and feel pretty good about what we're offering up for consideration here.
Does this come to us then with the recommendation of your subcommittee that we approve it?
Yes.
Zane, I want to give you an opportunity for your comments.
The only thing I'd add is every time I start to touch my button to answer a question, it was already covered extensively, and we had these same questions come up yesterday in detail, and a lot of additional questions along the technical lines. The idea of the subject of the width, I think, came into play yesterday because we understand that the fixed guideway study is looking at possibly expanding streetcars throughout the city, not just in the streetcar from MAPS 3, and that's why it was became an issue, or not an issue, but a topic of discussion. Is we want to make sure that we have something that's compatible with the future expansion. And other than that, I think all the other subjects were cost, schedule, and performance. Risk drives cost and schedule, so that's why we went with the system that we're proposing in the RFP.
And Amanda reminded me that we do need to, I guess, vote separately on the amendment to the 5-vehicle minimum as a separate item before we vote on the RFP as a whole. So I'll go ahead and make a motion to amend the minimum vehicles from 4 to 5 with an option
I'll
for
second
7.
that motion.
All right. It has been, let's see, Carol and Amanda, we need to vote on the amendment first. Is that it? All right. It's been moved and seconded that we amend the resolution that's before us to change from 4 to 5 vehicles initially, a minimum of 5, from 4 to 5. Further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? It's unanimous. Is there...
Now
we are
I'll
ready.
move to approve the amended RFP, recommended RFP.
Motion's been made and seconded that we approve the resolution as amended. Further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The resolution is approved. Are there further questions? Any other comments from you, David? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time.
I do want to say a special word of thank you, not only to Nathaniel and Zane, but to Mark and to David and his staff. This has been a very long and difficult road, and I say they've done a really great job of examining all of the issues, and I just want to publicly thank you guys for the time and effort that you put into this, because it's really, we're going to get a great result, and a big part of that is because of what you all have done. So many thanks to you, and to our consultants as well, to Mike and Nicole and Mark. Thanks for being such a faithful subcommittee member and showing up often. We appreciate it. Anything else from you guys? All right, let's go to the next one, the MAPS 3 Advisory Board Subcommittee reports. Oh, new business. Wow. All right. New business.
We have none.
He just loves a chance to correct me, doesn't he? It's an awful lot like being home. Well, okay, now to the subcommittee. We've heard a lot about a couple of subcommittees. Are there any subcommittees that have a report, even if you didn't meet?
I might just mention that we're excited to bring notice that we do have all the land now for our West River Trail. So we appreciate the work of staff to get that accomplished for us. We're celebrating that.
Thank you. Well, I wanted to just mention that the Convention Center Subcommittee is not met. for the last couple of months, but there's a lot of work going on in the background. As you know, we commissioned Kathy O'Connor and the Alliance to gather some information for us that would inform the decision about the plan that we ultimately adopt and how it would affect economic activity around it and the convention center hotel. So there's a lot of work going on, but we did not have an action item for this month, but I expect to be telling you more about it as we get into the fall. Kim?
I would like to convey the same type of messages. The Park Subcommittee has not met for the last couple of months, but staff has been hard at work. Hargraves is hard at work, doing a lot of the design. Stakeholder meetings have taken place, so there's a lot going on behind that curtain as well, and looking at the other projects in both the streetcar and the convention center that relate to it. So even though we're not meeting, things are progressing.
Anyone else? All right, that takes us to the informational items. David?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In your packet, you have information for the informational items. Item A is acceptance of a permanent easement, and this has been sent to council, and it's for the sidewalk Phase 2, Project 1, which was bid this Tuesday, which came in under budget. So that's some more sidewalks that we'll be able to put on the street, so to speak. Item B is acceptance of a warranty deed, and as Ms. Hooper mentioned, this is for the last parcel of land on the MAPS 3 Trails Phase 1 West River connection.
David, you say acceptance of deed. You had to purchase the land.
We did. In some places, there's some old plats where the right-of-way was not sufficient to put sidewalks in there, and we purchased right-of-way from businesses or homeowners.
Okay. And so what did that cost us?
This one was $1,800.
It's the same as item A?
You talking about the item B?
Item B, yeah.
I don't know what that one was. I can get that information for you.
Okay. Asking us to approve the purchase of something. I'm just curious what happened.
Well, it's already, this is just informational, and it's already gone to council.
All right. That brings us to item 10. David, you want to give us an update on things we might not have already discussed?
Yes, sir. I'd love to. There's a lot of work going on right now. As far as the river, the Phase 2 improvements are still under construction, and the Whitewater facility bids today at 2 o'clock. So we're very excited about that. Senior wellness, the wellness center design is underway for both wellness centers 1 and 2. One's just a little ahead of the other, so we've got a lot of work going on with the wellness centers. Trails and sidewalks, as I mentioned, we just got more bids for sidewalks, but it's hard to go anywhere within the city that you don't see sidewalks being built, either through MAPS or through Public Works. So Phase 1 sidewalk projects 1, 2, and 3 are under construction. Phase 1 trails, Project 1 and 2 are under construction. Phase 2 Project 1 sidewalk was just bid, as I mentioned. Phase 3 sidewalks is in design, and the Phase 2 trails I-44 corridor is in design. You mentioned the status of the convention center. That continues. Fairgrounds, parking and utilities projects are completed, and you'll be getting final acceptance on that here in the next meeting or so. The Expo building will bid on the 31st of this month, which is a week from today. So we're excited about that also. And as Ms. Lowe mentioned with the park, the design continues and coordination of utilities is underway. And then we heard plenty about the streetcar today, so this RFP will go to council for advertisement.
Any questions for David? Well, thank you, David. This is a busy time. Let's then move to item 11, comments by the board. Staff, David, any staff comments? Well, then we want to offer an opportunity to the public. Mark, yes. Welcome.
Thank you. Mark Gibbs, 601 North Broadway. At least I took the time off work, so I may as well come down and speak to you. When I first spoke to you, that was immediately after I'd been appointed, 4.5 years ago, and I told you at that time that the risk to the project, the risk to streetcar projects is a huge issue, and that's something that we'd be focused on, and we continue to be focused on that. we've already heard, I just want to add to that, the exhaustive work that's gone on by the consultants, by the staff and us on the committee. I've personally travelled to Germany to evaluate some of the wireless systems on my own time and money. And we have really gone around the houses. We've looked at everything very carefully. There are fundamental legal constraints. There are fundamental procurement constraints, or risks, rather, if you go over proprietary technology. And we're really at the point, the committee's very, very sure that this is the point, this is the best way to go forward. There's more steps to come. You just saw on that long list, just going through the RFP process, there will still be a lot of work to do. But one thing I wanted to draw to your attention is that things aren't kind of off out in the future anymore. There are some very clear steps. Choosing the route is an important step. This is now going to be an important step. And it now starts to lay out very clear timetable. There's a very clear, detailed timetable in the RFP. And you start to see, well, exactly where are we on the schedule and exactly what milestones are we meeting or not meeting. So I know David and the staff will be re-looking at the schedule as we go forward here. And one thing I just want to bring to your attention is, one of the discussions yesterday, do we look at 4 cars or 5 cars as the base order? To deliver the first core route, the phase 1, with an expected level of service, we needed 4 cars plus a spare. And that was a technical requirement. There are some procurement issues about whether you could potentially invalidate the RFP later on if they came in too high. But I really want the committee to be aware, we're aware of it, I want the board to be aware that the phase 1, phase 2 is somewhat of an arbitrary split to manage the whole of the MAPS project. And if there comes some decision point in saying, well, the base cost of these cars is $4.5 million, let's say, arbitrarily, and where does that put us with the track for this? It may come necessary just to look at what you're putting into phase 2 and phase 1 to make sure that the whole project does get delivered successfully. So I just wanted to give you a heads up. That's something we've been thinking of, and that may come across your plate in due course. And thank you for approving the RFP today. We've got a long way to go, but this was an important step. Thank you.
Mark. We all appreciate the service you've rendered to this project. Thank you for being here. Anyone else? If not, Susan has moved we adjourn, and Mike has seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We're adjourned.